Number 3. The Duplessis Orphans of Quebec, Canada. The world imagines Canada as a bastion of politeness and progressive values. But between the 1940s and 1960s, in the province of Quebec, the collusion between the Catholic Church and the provincial government spawned one of the most monstrous, systematic cover-ups in modern North American history. It was a scheme built not on passion, but on cold, bureaucratic calculus. They took healthy and wanted children and, with the stroke of a pen, declared them legally insane. The architect was Premier Maurice Duplessis. His government had a simple, cruel financial incentive. Orphanages received significantly less state funding than psychiatric institutions. The solution was as logical as it was evil. Thousands of orphan children born out of wedlock or from impoverished families had their medical records systematically falsified. Diagnoses like schizophrenia, mental deficiency, and psychosis were stamped onto files for children as young as 6. They were not sick. They were inconvenient. Overnight, these Duplessis orphans were transferred from orphanages to the nightmarish world of psychiatric hospitals like Saint-Jean-de-Dieu in Montreal. And then, the real horror began. The children became human canvases for medical experimentation. They were subjected to brutal electroshock therapy without anesthesia, their small bodies convulsing on the tables. They were force-fed experimental psychotropic drugs, cocktails that left them disoriented, vomiting, and their young minds fragmenting into chaos. They were locked away in isolation cells for months on end, their only crime being their existence. Many suffered relentless sexual abuse at the hands of the very clergy and staff sworn to protect them. When they dared to speak out, their complaints were dismissed as the ravings of the insane. Who would believe a mental patient? The system was designed to silence them. Thousands of these children never made it out. Their bodies were disposed of with the same chilling efficiency. Some were buried in unmarked graves on hospital grounds. Others were sold to medical schools for dissection. Persistent, horrifying rumors speak of organ harvesting. The government and the church kept meticulous financial records of these transactions, but the records of the children's true identities, their families, their lives, these were systematically destroyed. Decades later, the survivors, branded the Duplessis Orphans, began to find their voices. They fought for recognition, for an apology, for justice. The Quebec government, facing mounting pressure, finally acknowledged the abuse in 1999 but refused a full public inquiry. The Catholic Church offered vague expressions of regret but accepted no concrete responsibility. Most survivors received only a pittance in compensation, a bitter token that could never erase the decades of trauma. The physical institutions were shut down, their halls emptied. But the children, it seems, never truly left. The old Saint-Jean-de-Dieu hospital has been partially converted into a shopping complex, a place of commerce built upon a foundation of suffering. Construction workers and nighttime security guards tell consistent, disturbing stories. They hear the faint, desperate screams of children emanating from behind walls that have been sealed for decades. Small, grimy handprints appear on freshly painted walls and cleaned windows, with no logical explanation. There are corridors, now leading to modern offices, that carry an oppressive, chilling weight, a palpable sense of terror that seems to seep from the very concrete. One security guard in 2008 was doing his final rounds in the largely unused basement. Without warning, his flashlight died, plunging him into absolute darkness. As he fumbled with the batteries, he heard a soft, childlike voice singing a lullaby in French. The melody was gentle, but the voice was hollow, devoid of hope. Finally, his flashlight flickered back to life. And that's when he saw them. Dozens of children, standing motionless in the deep shadows of the vast basement. They wore tattered hospital gowns, their faces pale, their eyes dark and empty voids, all fixed on him. He didn't wait. He ran, and he never returned. Paranormal investigators who have braved the still abandoned sections of these hospitals report a constant, oppressive energy. Their recordings are a chorus of the damned, children crying for their mothers, voices begging to be let out of locked rooms, whispers pleading for the pain to stop. In one particularly chilling recording, an investigator asks into the silence, "What happened to you?" After a moment, a clear, young voice, trembling with a mixture of fear and anger, responds, "They hurt us. They said it was God's will. They said no one would believe us." The surviving Duplessis orphans continue their fight for a full public inquiry and the right to recover the bodies of their lost friends and siblings. But in the dark, silent basements, and the forgotten isolation cells of Quebec's asylums, their younger selves remain trapped, forever reliving an eternal nightmare. They are a permanent scar on the nation's soul. Some sins are so vast, so deeply rooted in cruelty, that they transcend time and demand to be remembered, forever echoing in the places where they were committed. Number 2. The Hanford nuclear experimentation on citizens, Richland, Washington. During the feverish race of World War II and the paranoia of the Cold War, the Hanford site in Washington state was a crown jewel of American military might. It produced the plutonium for the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki, a symbol of ultimate power. But hidden behind the patriotic fervor and the promise of national security was a chilling secret, a decades-long program of human experimentation that the U.S. government would vehemently deny for over half a century. Between 1944 and 1974, scientists at Hanford conducted a series of tests, the most infamous being the Green Run. In a deliberate act, they released massive quantities of radioactive iodine-131 and other fission products into the atmosphere. They gave no warning to the surrounding communities of Richland, Pasco, and Kennewick, the Tri-Cities. They simply opened the valves and let the invisible poison drift over farms, schools, and homes. The population below had become an unwitting control group in a grotesque, open-air laboratory. The consequences began to manifest in eerie, unexplained ways. Farmers watched their livestock die of strange, wasting illnesses. Children developed rare forms of thyroid cancer and leukemia at alarming rates. Clusters of birth defects appeared. When concerned citizens asked questions, they were met with a wall of calm, paternalistic assurance from government officials. Everything was perfectly safe. It was all routine. It was a lie, meticulously maintained. Declassified documents finally pried from the government's grasp in the 1980s revealed the horrifying truth. Hanford had released over 740,000 curies of radioactive iodine alone. The scientists knew the releases would contaminate the food chain, specifically through milk, and sicken the population. They knew people would develop cancer. They knew people would die. That was the entire point. They needed data on the long-term effects of low-level radiation exposure, and the citizens of the Tri-Cities were their test subjects. A flood of lawsuits followed, but most were settled out of court with binding non-disclosure agreements, sealing the victims' mouths with cash. The government never formally admitted fault. To this day, the full, horrifying extent of the experiments remains locked away in classified files. But the land itself holds the memory. The Hanford site is now the most contaminated nuclear site in the Western Hemisphere. Over 56 million gallons of radioactive waste sit in aging, leak-prone underground tanks, a toxic legacy that will persist for millennia. The cleanup effort is a monumental, century-spanning task. And in the silent, cavernous buildings of the old reactor complexes, something unnatural lingers. Workers on the cleanup crews, clad in protective suits, report phantom figures, apparitions of men in 1940s-era radiological gear, their forms flickering like static on a television screen, seen in the peripheral vision before vanishing. They hear the ghostly hum of machinery that was decommissioned a lifetime ago. Some report a sudden, inexplicable burning sensation on their skin in specific areas, a psychosomatic echo of the invisible poison that once filled the air. In 2015, a cleanup crew inside the historic B-reactor building watched in horror as their sensitive dosimeters suddenly screamed to life. The radiation levels in one corner of the room had spiked to instantly lethal levels. They scrambled, searching for a breach, leak, any source for the reading. They found nothing. But all of them had seen the same thing just moments before, a human-shaped shadow, dark and indistinct, standing in that exact corner. The full truth remains buried under layers of national security and bureaucratic shame. The radiation will glow, a deadly testament, for thousands of years. And in the contaminated silence of the control rooms and reactor halls, the shadows of the Green Run remain, the ghostly test subjects who never knew they were part of the experiment, forever watching from the darkness. Some secrets don't just hide in the past, they glow in the dark, a permanent reminder of the price of power. Number 1. The mass grave at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School of Pennsylvania. Kill the Indian, save the man. This was the guiding philosophy, the official motto. It was not a metaphor, it was a policy of cultural genocide, and for nearly 4 decades, the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania was its brutal epicenter. From 1879 to 1918, Native American children were forcibly ripped from their families and their cultures. Their traditional clothes were taken and burned. Their long hair, sacred to many nations, was shorn. Their names were replaced with European ones. They were beaten for speaking their own languages and punished for practicing their spiritual beliefs. The school's founder, Captain Richard Henry Pratt, called this process civilization. In reality, it was the systematic murder of identity. The records state they succumbed to tuberculosis, pneumonia, or other illnesses. But for over a century, the survivors and their descendants told a different story, a whispered history of brutal fatal beatings, of children who died from neglect and malnutrition, of mysterious medical procedures and experiments, of children who simply vanished without a trace. The US government dismissed these accounts as legend, sealing records and denying any wrongdoing. Then, in 2016, the Earth itself began to speak. A comprehensive ground-penetrating radar survey of the Carlisle cemetery was conducted. The results were horrifying. The cemetery did not hold 200 bodies. It concealed the remains of over 500. Hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered, a silent testament to children whose deaths were never recorded, whose lives were erased from the official history. The government's cover-up had hidden not just neglect, but what amounted to mass murder. Today, the grounds of the Carlisle barracks are deceptively peaceful. The old school buildings still stand, and the cemetery, with its newly recognized scope, sits under ancient, shading trees. It looks maintained, respectful. But to step onto that soil is to feel an immediate, visceral shift. A profound, collective rage seems to emanate from the ground itself. The air grows cold and heavy, difficult to breathe. A feeling of being watched by countless, sorrowful eyes is inescapable. Military personnel stationed there report unsettling phenomena. They hear the sound of children weeping at night, the cries seeming to come not from any building, but from the very soil. In the dead of night, some hear the faint, steady beat of a drum or the haunting melody of a traditional native song carried on the wind across the empty parade grounds. Apparitions are common, children seen in the stark, uniform clothing of the school, standing at the tree line, their figures fading if approached directly. One soldier, on night guard duty near the cemetery's edge, saw a young native girl in a drab, gray dress, her hair cut short in the school style, standing among the headstones and weeping softly. Concerned, he approached and asked if she was lost. She looked up, her dark eyes filled with a bottomless sorrow, and whispered, "We can't go home. They won't let us go home." He turned for a moment to call it in on his radio. When he looked back, the girl was gone. There was no one there. A subsequent investigation in 2017 uncovered a further desecration. Identify them through DNA where possible and finally lay them to rest in their ancestral lands according to their own customs. The process is slow, hindered by lost records and bureaucratic inertia, quiet continuation of the cover-up. But the children of Carlisle are no longer silent. Paranormal activity has intensified. Investigators report being physically pushed, feeling and seeing hands scratch their skin, and having their equipment malfunction or be thrown across the room. This is not mere malevolence, it is a desperate, powerful cry for recognition. They are screaming to be heard, demanding the justice they were denied in life. They refuse to be forgotten. Captain Pratt's mission was a catastrophic failure. He didn't save anyone, he destroyed generations, creating a trauma that ripples through Native families to this day. And in that quiet, shaded cemetery in Pennsylvania, the spirits of over 500 children remain. They are waiting. They are calling out across the years to their families, their nations. They are a permanent stain on the American conscience, a chorus of voices from unmarked graves that absolutely refuse to stay silent. You have now uncovered all 6 of history's darkest secrets. These are not tales from distant lands or ancient times. They are horrors that unfolded here, sanctioned by governments, hidden by religious institutions, and buried by the very people entrusted with writing our history. The medical torture of children at Willowbrook, the brutal sadism at the Dozier School, the cold betrayal of Tuskegee, the calculated cruelty towards the Duplessis Orphans, the radioactive poisoning of citizens at Hanford, and the cultural genocide at Carlisle. These are the scars on the hidden face of our past. Those in power tried to cover it all up, to seal the records and bury the evidence. But the truth has a terrible, persistent energy. It surfaces in the silent testimony of declassified documents, in the courage of survivors, and in the eerie, undeniable phenomena that haunt these grounds. The spirits trapped in Willowbrook still whimper in the dark. The boys of Dozier still wait for justice in the soil of Boot Hill. The men of Tuskegee still ask their heartbreaking why. The Duplessis Orphans still linger in the basements of their asylums. The shadow people of Hanford still watch from their contaminated control rooms. And the children of Carlisle, their voices are now the strongest, rising from the earth itself, demanding to finally be brought home. So we are left with a chilling question. If these 6 secrets were so diligently hidden, what others still lie concealed in locked filing cabinets, sealed court orders, and forgotten and marked graves? What other terrifying truths are we not meant to discover? The official story is always just the first draft. The final version is often written in blood and tears, and it is etched into the very places where the darkness happened. These stories never truly die. They simply wait, patiently, for someone brave enough to listen.